Hi, I'm Jonathan Burke and I teach SAT reading at Elite English Language Institute of Testing and Education. Today I'm going to tell you about hacking the SAT reading test. Many of you might find that the reading section is the most difficult part of the SAT test. And if that's the case, it's probably because you haven't considered these 4 questions. Firstly, what are the SAT reading question categories? Secondly, what reading skills are tested by each category? Thirdly, what general approaches are useful for each question category? And fourthly, how do you manage your time? By the end of this video, you will have the answers to all 4 of those questions, and then the SAT reading section won't be the most difficult for you anymore. The SAT reading section has 3 main question categories. Information and ideas questions focus on the author's message. They're usually short questions about small details like word definitions. Rhetoric questions focus on how the author puts together a text. These usually involve questions about logical connections such as cause and effect. Synthesis questions draw conclusions by comparing a pair of passages or combining information from a passage and a figure such as a table, chart, or graph. Each reading question category tests a different kind of reading skill. Information and ideas questions test your ability to understand and explain how the author uses information to present their ideas. Rhetoric questions test your ability to understand logical arguments and make connections such as drawing inferences when you have incomplete information. Synthesis questions test your ability to combine information, either combining textual information with visual information from a figure such as a table, chart, or graph, or combining information from 2 different passages and using that information to draw a conclusion which you could not have drawn if you only had one of the sources of information by itself. To conquer the SAT reading test, you need to understand the general approach which is necessary for each different question category. Firstly, strategies for information and ideas. These questions always ask you about small details, such as the meaning of a word in its context, or statements of opinion or fact, or small pieces of information that you gather from a figure, such as a table, chart, or graph. Firstly, identify the key ideas in the question which give you the main idea of what the question is about. Then look for the information in the text or the figure. If the information is in the text, you'll usually be told where to look for it. For example, you'll be given a line number reference. If you're told that the information is in a figure, you'll always be told which figure to look at. Once you've identified the key idea in the question, look at the line reference in the text, or if you don't have a line reference, scan through the topic sentences in the paragraphs to identify the paragraph which is most likely to be talking about the subject of the question. If you're being directed to a figure, identify the key idea in the question, then look for the part of the figure which addresses that information. Secondly, strategies for rhetoric. These questions always ask you to apply some logical reasoning in order to get the information to answer the question. You will usually be told where to find the information, so you'll be given a line reference for the passage. First, identify the kind of reasoning that the question is asking you to apply. It will usually be cause and effect, or identifying a conclusion, or drawing an inference. Then find the part of the passage which speaks about the main idea of the question, which you can identify by looking at the question's key words. Then go to the part of the passage which talks about the subject of the question, either by checking the reference number of the lines you've been given or by scanning the paragraphs. Then look for words in the passage which indicate the kind of reasoning that you're being asked to apply. Cause and effect words, words introducing a conclusion, or words which indicate an inference needs to be drawn. Thirdly, strategies for synthesis. These questions ask you to combine two pieces of information in order to gain new information. If you're being asked to compare two passages, then you may or may not be told where to look for the information in those passages. If you're being asked to compare a passage and a figure, you'll always be told which figure to look at, and you may or may not be told where in the passage to look for the information. Remember that you need to check for the main idea in the question and then find that main idea in each of the two sources of information, either the two passages or the passage and the figure. Remember also that the answer that you give means that the two passages or the two sources of information must agree with the information in the question. In addition to the strategies for each question category, you also need to know how to manage your time. Remember, the SAT test doesn't care in what order you answer questions, so you should prioritize the questions which take the least amount of time because they only ask you to process the least amount of information. You can use this list as a rough guide. Firstly, questions asking for simple facts. These include word in context meaning questions, questions which only ask you about information in a single line of the passage, or questions asking for simple details that you can find in a figure. Secondly, questions asking for a little bit more information. These include questions which ask you to find information in two or several lines, questions which ask you to find information in an entire paragraph, or questions which ask you to find the best evidence for the answer that you gave to a previous question. Thirdly, questions asking about the entire passage. These include questions asking about the main or central idea or theme of a passage, questions which ask you about the structure of a passage, or questions which ask you to look at two passages or to look at a passage and a figure. Now you have some basic ideas about the SAT reading test, which should really help you to answer those questions. Don't forget to subscribe and follow this channel. Bye-bye.